Three, two, one, and we're live. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Village Made podcast. My name is Vail Media, and man, don't forget to check out our sponsors in the description box below. Shout out to our sponsors. But today we got an exciting episode. Man, this is a big family, and you're gonna recognize the name once you hear it. But today we have Kinikini, and let's just get straight into this, man. But no, first of all, thank you. I appreciate
no
the time.
worries, man. I appreciate you inviting me here, man. I'm happy to be here.
I know, man. It's just good, making time for us. But
Of course.
let's just get into this with just the story of your names. Who named you, and the meaning of your last name.
Yeah, man. So my full name is literally on my birth certificate is William, not Viliami or Viliamu. It's William Edward Kinikini, and so it's pretty white, dude. It's pretty not traditional in terms of a Polynesian name. But the way that the name came about, maybe falls under that more than the name itself.
Right.
So I'm half Tongan and half Samoan. So my dad is Tongan, obviously the Kinikini side, pretty big family here in Utah. And I don't know if I haven't fact checked this story. This is just kind of I've been able to put it together through growing up, and so this story might not be 100% accurate. And so for my family that sees this, you can correct in the comments or whatever. But the story that I'm told, so I had an uncle whose name is Viliami, and he was serving a mission at the time. So my dad's sister, the Fahu, I don't know if she deferred it to him. You know how sometimes that happens, and he was the missionary at the time that I was born. I also have a cousin. Her name is Elizabeth Leeds. He was serving in the Leeds mission, and so we were born 9 days apart. And so both of our names kind of took on English royalty, that kind of theme. And so that's that's where my name comes from. So it's pretty generic. If you look at the first name on the classroom roll, I might surprise you when you see my big face. But so yeah, that's my first and middle name, and that's how that came about, was just kind of trying to follow a royal English theme because he was serving in England at the time. And then Kinikini, to be honest, I don't even know what Kinikini means. I know that Kini, and I only just found this out when I called my dad right before, because I knew you were going to ask this. I think Kini by itself just means to slice something. No one ever says Kinikini in terms of speaking Tongan. And that's my names, man. My face makes me look like I have a cooler story to my names, but that's what it is. It's my aunt or my uncle or a combination of family members decided to name me that, man.
I know you mentioned that you're half Tongan, half Samoan.
Yep.
Do you know the villages that your parents come from?
Yeah. So my grandpa. So I was born here in Provo. So again, I'm pretty Johnny Utah. So I was born here in Provo, but my grandpa is from Uiha in Tonga, and my grandma, his mom, is from Kolovai, and then my dad was born in Uiha just briefly. Then he moved to Laia. He grew up in Laia, in your home turf, man. And then my mom was born and raised in New Zealand, but just to represent also, my Samoan heritage. My grandpa, my mom's dad, is from Fakausi or something like that. Okay. And then what the heck is then my grandma's from Malaila. So yeah.
Man, that's cool, because that's the best of both worlds, right? Yeah. Tongan and Samoan.
Yeah, man.
But
I'm probably gonna get a lot of crap from because that's just from what I was able to piece together. But whatever, dude.
No worries. For you being born here, were you born and raised in Provo, or just born in Provo and then raised somewhere else?
Okay, I was just born in Provo. My parents met while they were going to school. Yeah, they met while I was going to school. Then I grew up in kind of West Valley area, and then most of my life in Sandy. But there was even a time where I lived in Sandy, but I was still kind of growing up in West Valley because both of my parents worked. And And so like my family was dropping me off early in the morning. Like we would wake up, me and my brothers, we would wake up at like 4 in the morning because both my parents worked, and we had to drive all the way to West Valley to drop us off so that they had time to go to work.
Where'd they drop you off to? Just family
West
members?
Valley, yeah, family members.
Oh, okay.
Which kind of goes to like, because I know that your question earlier is like, what does your last name mean?
Yeah.
And everyone has to forgive me. I don't speak Tongan.
No worries.
I don't speak Samoan. My parents, the only way they could communicate was English, right? So they couldn't speak their native tongues in our home. So while you know, I mean, that's just how we grew up. We only speak English, and then but going back to kind of what your last name means, to me, I think because I don't speak those languages, like I think like I've had to think about like what that means to me, maybe like in a different level or on a different level, how that translates to me. And I think, I mean, there used to be a time like when I used to hear my last name growing up, everyone's really proud of their family, and
right.
You're proud of your uncles, and you kind of think that your family can beat up every other person's family, right? You're just so proud of it. Like, and I think that's initially like, growing up. I think since then and through the experiences that I've gone through, I've learned that, or maybe a definition I subscribe to more for what my last name means to me. I think it just means support, man. Because I think throughout like just growing up and whatever, your family, sometimes you guys fight. Sometimes like you and brothers threaten to beat up and kill each other or whatever, and then you're best friends a little bit later. But I think through it all, you're able to. That's what like my last name or family means to me. It's support. This is a great example, right? When both my parents needed to go to work, me and my little brothers, had to wake up at 4 a.m, and who do we go to? We went to family, So that's maybe an add-on to what you just mentioned.
So what was childhood like for you growing up in Sandy, or was it Sandy mostly? And then maybe what were some of the cultural traditions or, etiquettes that were taught in the home, maybe from both either Tongan or the Samoan, or maybe just even the American?
Yeah. Well, dude, I think that's a cool question because so it was interesting growing up, like, right? So I grew up in kind of like really like early childhood was West Valley. Then there was like maybe up to 3rd grade, I was still going to elementary school in West Valley. And West Valley, for those who aren't familiar with Utah, right, is more diverse in terms of ethnicities that live in that city. It's more diverse than Sandy.
Right.
And so I kind of ended up in kind of a cool place that maybe in the beginning I wasn't like so comfortable in, right? Like when I was in Sandy, I was with, my white friends. And when I was with my cousins and stuff in West Valley, like it was just different, And so when growing up in West Valley first, again, going back to family and support, I think everything kind of falls like tied in together. I was only in West Valley because of my family,
yep.
Right? And then my little family, meaning my siblings and my parents, they needed help, and so they leaned on family. And so childhood was pretty tight, man. Like I really loved growing up. I hopefully all little kids get to go through this and go to elementary school with all your first cousins. I grew up and went to elementary school with all my first cousins on my Tongan side. I don't even think I realized that I was like, I knew if someone asked me if I was half Samoan, I was like, oh yeah, I'm Samoan. But like, because I grew up with my dad's side for a long time, I kind of just knew mostly Tongan type stuff. And it was cool to grow up in West Valley like that, man. Mm. And like, and because there's things like, and shout out to like Inoke Hafoka. You need to have him on here, man. I had a cool conversation with him, and he talked about culture and
can you talk about that?
Yeah, and so like it was cool because he says, and I've had a couple conversations after like around the same thing, and he's getting his doctorate's degree from UCLA right now. He's thought a lot about cultures and our culture specifically, and he talked about how. When you start talking about culture, you have to kind of first subscribe to this idea that culture is fluid, mm-hmm. and I love that, man, because and I'm not a historian, so again, like, don't get mad at me, everyone. Like, but like, he brought up the Tongan dances, right? The traditional dances, the laka laka or whatever. Like, we wear a white shirt. Now, if you go back even further than to other traditional dances before Christianity came, there was no white shirt, right? So, but today we accept that as a traditional Tongan dance, right? Which personally I have ties to, but that's what culture is fluid, like, right? So if I tell someone, oh, this is, they wear the white shirts, that's how you can tell it's a Tongan dance or whatever. Or I know that Tongans back in the day, like, it was traditional practice to also have tattoos also, and that's right. Now a lot of people just deem that as kind of mostly a Samoan or Maori thing. But it was kind of practiced all over, right? And I think Harris, he talked about that same thing too.
He did, yeah.
And so I think anytime you talk about culture, you have to first talk about that it's fluid, right? Like, in that, it can evolve. It's
always evolving,
right? From generation to generation, and so when you talk about, like, so when I talk about my culture, it's kind of like what was passed down, right? And the big emphasis was family. And growing up with my family was just so fun, dude. Like, and I was lucky to have, maybe it's similar to Laie, because Laie is kind of a smaller town. Yeah. Like, we had a family just down the street. My grandma's house was a 2-minute walk from my aunt's house. My aunt's house was a 2-minute walk from my uncle's house. And then our elementary school was across the street from that.
The Kinikinis run the block. Huh?
Yeah. So it was just, And then even my grandma's side, who's not Kinikini, but her family lived on the same block. So it was just, we were surrounded by family, and it was fun. And there are things that trickle down culturally that you don't even recognize, right? Little kids just say, oh, that's just how it is, because they maybe aren't able to articulate it yet. Yeah. But like, I remember, like, when we were in elementary school, my cousin, who was the closest to me at the time, and her name is Liz, we were in the same class, and we had to, like, paint pictures, right? And or we had to do some kind of picture, and then the class was going to vote on who had the best picture. And I remember, I don't remember what I was thinking, but I did the ugliest picture that anybody can think of. And when it came time to vote, and we all sat in a circle, and then the teacher goes, hey, all right, who votes for this picture? And she would just hold up the picture, and then everyone would stand up if you wanted to vote. And then, but as a little kid, this could potentially be a traumatizing experience, right? Because then my picture came up, and nobody stood. Like, you can see everybody kind of move, right? They're about to stand up because we're sitting on the floor. And my picture came up, and I was so embarrassed because nobody even moved. And the only person that kind of moved was my first cousin, my sister, Liz. Yeah, she stands up, and she kind of was weirded out because I was so mad that she was the only one, that I just stayed, and I put my head down, and my eyes filled up with water because I was so embarrassed. But, like, I think about stuff like that, and she just did that for no other reason than she was family, and family is support, right? And that kind of, has. I found that all the time, even as I grew up, right? Because then I eventually, my family kind of goes to Sandy. We grew up in Sandy, and I have, like, a lot of white friends. Yeah. And like, they made fun of me because even cultural, and going back to culture, right? Like, West Valley versus Sandy, culturally, at the time that I was going to school, was very different.
So different, right?
You know what I mean? And that's just like a 20-minute car ride. You could walk into, a high school in the Sandy Draper area versus the, West Valley Magna area, and you could tell that, it was just different. But so as I did that, I for sure I got, like, the jokes, like, oh, Will's Fia Palangi, or his clothes are from Baby Gap, and they were.
It might be a little smaller or tighter compared to your cousins down the street in West Valley.
See, except for back then, the choice was on purpose why the clothes were tight. Today, it's not on purpose. They just, whatever shirt I put on, it just looks tight. But yeah, so growing up was just so fun, dude. Like, and culturally, I would think I was affected by my family. And I don't think I even split the definition of culture and family up, growing up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think like my family and just of like, oh, I'm going with my cousins, my family, like that just was culture to me. You know what I mean? That was the Tongan culture. I now have seen a lot more, families and realize that my family, even within the Tongan community, might be different. But that's what culture was to me. Like, and it was so odd for me, dude. I remember being a junior in high school, like. You should like, and I thought I was pretty cool, and I think I was cool, man. But I remember I was sitting in biology class or some kind of science class, and I was so excited because I knew when we were done with school, we were going over to my cousin's house for some kind of family function, and I told it to my friends. I was like, "Dude, I'm excited, man. I'm going over to my cousin's house," and he was like, "You're going to your cousin's house, like?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to my cousin's house," and he's like, I don't even know my first cousins, man. And it was just kind of, and I feel like a lot of polys go through this when you kind of start speaking to your friends. But like, it was like an event. Like it was like people might get excited to go to a concert or to an art show. I don't know. As a high schooler, I mean, if it wasn't, a sporting event that I was involved in, I was jacked and pumped to go to my cousin's house, man, just to play with my cousins, because that's how much of a part of it was for me. And I think even my white friends knew that. Sorry, dude, I'm talking a lot. But
no, you're good. These experiences that you have, I'm sure other people can relate to that. And so that's why I enjoy hearing these stories. And I'm sure other people will enjoy hearing them as well, because they're super relatable.
Well, hopefully, dude. Otherwise, you can just go on to Austin Child's episode, because his is really interesting. But no, like, but I think what I was saying is I think even my white friends like kind of caught on to how I was. While I loved to hang out with them and stuff, like there was even a joke between my group of friends, my group of my white friends, that would say like, they'd be like, "Hey, Will, we're gonna go over here. There's gonna be a bunch of people over here," and I would be like, "Oh, guys, sorry, I'm good." And they'd be like, "Let me guess, you're going to your cousin's house." Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it kind of definitely, in terms of my identity, took on a huge portion of it, in those kind of formative teenage years where you're trying to find yourself. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are kind of all things that come to mind when you ask those questions about growing up and culturally finding myself. And really, I should know, at the end of high school, I don't even think I found myself. I think I was just still trying to float, But it was whatever.
Yeah. And well, just like you said, it's formative years, so you're still trying to figure it out. But I think for me, at least, it wasn't until my mission, coming back from my mission, then I kind of like had a better idea of who I was,
Yeah.
Whereas before the mission, it was just like, still kind of just wandering around. But
yeah. Well, like, I think that's interesting that you bring that up, because, and I think I said this just really briefly at the beginning, there's kind of growing up and seeing, like I'm over here with my poly friends, and then I go over here with my cousins and hang out with them at family reunions or functions or whatever. Sorry. I feel like, and I was talking to a good buddy of mine just barely about this, Steve Fifita, who I'll connect you to him, because we need to have Steve.
He does an impression on Instagram. Yeah, I follow
Shout out to Steve, impression.
Yeah, shout out to Steve. We'll get you on one of these days.
Yeah. And he's kind of, we had a really cool discussion about this, but like, I think because I grew up around like a lot of white people, and then like, I had my family members, I think I was always kind of about like, falling in the middle. And I feel like a lot of people like, like that are exposed to this might feel similar to this. And I think you've mentioned this. We talked about this actually offline. But where like maybe when in a white setting, I might feel like, dang, I'm like hecka fobby, or I'm hecka too like Tongan or whatever for this, or too diverse. Whatever word you want to plug in. And then when you're with your poly family, then you might feel like, dang, I'm a little too palangi over here, dude. Like, I'm not enough for Tongan, so like, poly enough. You kind of fall in this weird spot, like, and I think like as a teenager, you mean you just kind of don't talk about it. You're like, dang, dude, I don't. You mean, and you just kind of try to roll with the punches as best you can. But in my conversation with Steve earlier, I feel like I've kind of been able to benefit from it later on in life. Maybe just because you mean whenever those two cultures end up clashing, sometimes, and I happen to be there, maybe I'm somewhat of a mediator. Like, oh, they're just joking. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember there was a girl that I knew, and she was then there was a group of Pollies, and she meant to say something funny, and it wasn't very funny, and all the Pollies started laughing, and they're like, okay, don't ever say anything like that ever again, and like everybody starts laughing, and then but she took it like literally, right? And she was like, well, then, like, what? I'm never gonna say anything, or what? And she just kind of like,
but
I'll never talk to you. Yeah, and like in that situation, they didn't get that. She didn't get it. She didn't get that. She didn't get it. Right? Like, and I just happened to be like, look, they're just joking around. Like, they joke around like that all the time. Like, the meaner the joke is, the actually cooler you are with it. You know what I mean? And so, and that's just on a small scale. It's scaled, like, you know what I mean, even to affect me professionally. So, I think that's another tangent that I thought about in terms of culture and growing up.
Yeah, but I think with what you're talking about there, you know, being able to navigate your way between those groups of friends, you know, whether it's the Polynesians or the Palangis, I feel like it's a skill, you know what I mean? Like learning how to, you know, talk or learn how to communicate the way that they do, you know, one group does, and then also being able to go back to your Polynesians and, you know, learning to communicate that way. And that way you are the bridge, right? The gap, you bridge the gap between when they were telling her, don't say it again, but she didn't understand, you know?
Dude, communication is such a valuable skill, man. Yeah. It's so valuable. Like, and a lot of times when people think about communication, they just think about like me talking to you and you talking to me in plain English. But man, it's so much deeper. And the more you can master communication as a whole, right, you've built more value to yourself and your own life resume. You mean that doesn't necessarily have to affect you professionally, although I think it would. But it could affect you, like, you know what I mean, just in terms of your relationships that you have with your spouse, family, friends, right, or whatever. Like, sorry, I have another story. Let me tell another story that kind of, because I think it kind of communicates the same thing. I don't speak Tongan, right? Like, you look at me, you're like, that dude's definitely Polly, right? I'm not one of those, like, he kind of looks like, you know what I mean? Like, he could be this, he could be that, yeah. You don't think that there's any kind of white blood in me, and you're right, right? Like, I'm not offended. Like, I definitely look Polly, but I don't speak Tongan. My wife's family, I married a Tongan girl. We're at this function, and it was her side's thing, right? And in the back, right, all the boys are getting a bunch of food ready for this function. I'm in the back, and naturally, I'm smart enough to fall in line, right, and go.
You follow, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, all the boys over here. So all the boys go to the back. We start cutting manioke, right? And it had been boiling or steaming or whatever. We're ripping the foil off and cutting it and putting it into the tray. The
pans, yeah.
Right? Then we're going to take the tray inside or to whoever, for the family function that we were at. Now, mind you, I'm an in-law, and I don't speak Tongan. My wife's family is definitely way more Tongan than me, which is fine. But as we're there, all the boys are there, and most of the boys are kind of generally my age, right? So I'm kind of where I should be, in terms of like a Tongan social norm.
Yep.
But then as I'm cutting the manioke, one of the older guys comes, right? And he starts speaking Tongan. Now I'm like, oh crap, dude, he starts speaking Tongan. All the boys obviously understand, they're responding to him. So I'm just like, dude, just lay down and keep cutting the manioke with the knife that I had and just letting it fall into the pan. And then he says something, and like from the little Tongan, I know he starts talking to me, right? And I'm just like, now quickly in like 2 seconds, I go through this like mental like race where I'm like, do I acknowledge him? Like, I know that you're talking to me, and then go through the battle of trying to like pick the one or two words that I might understand in response? Or do I just pretend that I know that I don't know he's talking to me, even though I know that he is, and just keep cutting? And if you haven't gone through that, that's like a pretty like anxiety-filled experience, right? And I think a lot of people who aren't fluent in the language might find themselves in a situation like that. And I was just like, dude, what the crap do I do? And then so I decided the second one. I just like, dude, just keep cutting. Hopefully he stops talking to you. And I keep cutting. he quickly realizes it, and then I know because he starts saying like, you know what I mean, like my, like, you know, little things that I understand about like me, or like saying my name, and I know he's making fun of me, which is fine, dude. I'm totally down for, like, I think Polynesian humor is my favorite thing, one of my favorite things in the world, right? The way that, you mean, we joke around. You tell me a joke about this cup, and then my response is, no, this is about this cup, right? And we kind of recycle a joke about a cup like 50 times, and we're still laughing like from the first one, right? Like 10 minutes later about the cup, right? So I love that, and I love to participate in, like, you know what I mean? You mean any kind of whakakata with whoever, right? Any kind of joking, like, and so, so this happens, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, dude, and now he's like starting to kind of make fun of me, and not like a, like, you mean a degrading way. Right. It's just, this dude doesn't understand, right? That's probably what he's saying. And then luckily one of my wife's cousins, who's around the same age as me, a little older than me, he goes, Will, don't worry, man. Just tell him that's how you guys do it in Sandy, or something like that. You know what I mean? That's how you guys cut the manioca in Sandy. Yeah. So quickly, that's all it took, right? That skill that you're talking about, yeah, that skill. I just needed someone to give me a way in, dude. Because let's acknowledge that I don't speak Tongan, like, you know what I mean. And then straight away, my response, I stand up, I was like, nah, man, this is how we do it in Samoa. Everybody starts laughing, right? And then it was good, like, you know what I mean. But like that whole experience, maybe a total of 1 minute, right? But like the anxiety and my heart racing was
felt
pretty,
like you ran a marathon.
Yeah, it was dramatic, right? But like the skill of communication that you talked about, and my wife's cousin picking up on, Will doesn't understand. Yeah. Let me give him an in. I'm just gonna give him a step. He lets me in. I'm able to joke, and everything moves. You know what I mean? Like everything's able to move smoothly. And so I think that experience, you can switch kind of, you mean the names and situation around, but the principles of that situation, I think a lot of people go through that maybe aren't familiar with their language, right? But you're Poly, and you want to be proud, right, of your heritage. But in talking about the skill of communication, so important, especially in our Poly community, right? Because there are those that are so proud, and so what? So maybe I have a half caste homie, right, who's like still proud to be Tongan or Samoan. Who cares? Let them be proud. That's part of who they are, man. And so I think as we master the skill of communicating on a deeper level than just language, pound for pound, word for word, tip for tap, right, but kind of dive deeper, it's I think you'll be able to move the Poly society kind of forward.
No. I know we kind of talked about culture, or when we were, just off before this,
Yeah,
or
don't tell everyone that we had lunch before.
Right, yeah, that's what I was meaning. But before this, but I know when we were talking, at that time that you had mentioned talking about the fluidity of culture, right?
Yeah,
and then talking about how just kind of like what you were talking about, we always believe that culture is always evolving. Yeah. And so I believe, I too, prescribe to that same meaning. Yeah. With, I think it was Inoke that you said, yeah. Yeah. That it's a fluid thing, that it's always evolving. But what I wanted to mention was, at the end of the day, or for me and you, at the end of the day, we just try to be the best human beings that we can be. And in trying to be the best human beings that we can be, because at the end of the day, it just comes down to right or wrong. Yeah. It's just like, we got to do right and do more rights than we do wrong. Yeah. And so in that sense, it eliminates culture. And so because it doesn't matter what the culture is, but if you just try to be a good human being, I don't know, you want to expand on that? Or because we kind of talked about that, right? So
yeah. Well, I think culture is a thing, right? And that you know what I mean, and that should be respected, right? And I think everyone, and I think we do, right? I think you should, but it's always worth trying to see if you can take more steps back to see an even bigger picture. And I think that's what you're referring to. And so like, I think if you're not careful, right? Like if I focus so much on like like let's say that same situation earlier that we talked about, right, with the girl joking around with this group of poly boys, right, and they make fun of her and her feelings get hurt,
Right.
and they just say that's just how it is, get over it. You mean to an extent that's true, right? Like, hey, and that's why I was, had the benefit of being there to kind of relay, kind of translate culturally what's going on. Like, they actually, it's all good. That means they like you. Hang out with them. They're cool. You like that boy. He probably likes you. He made that joke. You know what I mean? Like, but you can't abuse it, right? You can just start going over and like it had that group of friends kept saying, whatever, whatever, and her feelings continue to get hurt, right, although she tries to understand it, and you just decide not to understand where she's coming from. Well, then maybe you're damaging a relationship, and maybe much more than that. So I think culturally, or anytime that you speak about culture or anything, right? Like you should try to see if you can take a few more steps back and understand where someone else is coming from. But it should go both ways, right? It shouldn't be, you don't want, like, I don't want someone, like, you can't just say like, hey, it's my way or the highway. It's saying, hey, Vail, like, this is how I saw it. How did you see it? Right. Okay, I see where you're coming from. And then you kind of just make a step forward in the right direction. And that's not always the most comfortable thing, right? And I think that's part of the issue. But that's kind of my take on that.
Man, I'm kind of glad that we're getting into this, deeper into this
there's probably going to be some people who are upset at me. They're like, man, Will's fit palang or whatever. All love, man.
Yeah, exactly. Can you mention also you sorry, just going a little bit backwards, but
sure.
You mentioned that your parents met going to school.
Yeah.
Do you know how they migrated or their migration story to the US?
Yeah. So, and I think everything's going to tie into kind of my definition of like my family name, right? Which is support. I think because, for my dad's family, my grandpa has a bunch of brothers, and that's why the Kinikini family seems like it has a big presence here in Utah, right? Because he has a bunch of brothers, so the last name continued to go on. And all of the brothers kind of collectively, to my understanding, I'll probably have some family members again correct me on this too, but to my understanding, all the brothers kind of collectively came together in helping migrate the family. So there was an uncle who worked for the airlines, right? And he was here in Utah, I believe. And he helped bring the family over through, that vessel. I had my dad and his dad, which is my grandpa, they lived in Hawaii, and they kind of maybe acted as kind of the port, right, to America, right? Kind of an easy, step up before you get to the mainland, right? And so, and all my grandpa's brothers, really took a part in kind of supporting, right, and that everyone to come over, and even extended family. I know my grandma also, right. My grandpa also helped his wife's family. So, and that's what family's about. I think supporting each other and coming over in that way, in whatever way it is. If it's to be the kind of stop in Hawaii, or to be the airline guy, or to be the guy working out there and sending money. Yeah. Everyone kind of comes together. And so that's how my dad and them came. My dad migrated, I guess, from technically, he's like Kinikini, like he was just really young, right? I think he was just not even a year old when he moved to Laie. So he definitely identifies with growing up in Laie. My mom is a pretty straightforward story. She grew up in New Zealand. She was born and raised in New Zealand. There's a lot of Samoans out there, being a Samoan community out there, and she served a mission, and it was pretty simple for her. I think she came back and recognized that the United States is a place that she wanted to be. She saved up money and worked weird jobs, and like cleaning toilets and stuff like that, the typical save up for whatever. The hustle and grind. So that's what she did, and there was not a lot of talking for her, and just saved up and did it, and came here. On the way here, she met that uncle that works at the airlines, and that's how she met my dad.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because for this question, sorry, with the sacrifices that your parents made, to move from the islands to the U.S. and who you are today with what you're doing, do you think that they'd be proud of you?
Dude, I hope so. And I feel like everybody says that on here. But but I hope they'd be proud, man. Like, and it's weird, right? Because it's not in a situation that they can control, right? Like, so like, I imagine my grandma and grandpa on both sides are, all of them have passed. I imagine that maybe they're in a stadium seat or something, looking at me, at my life, and
cheering you on.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, probably most of the time they're probably doing this. They're like, dude, what an idiot. But like, I think it's kind of a tough thing if I put myself in their situation, because they can't, right? They're like, my life is my decisions, and they just have to kind of hope and root for me to maybe progress. And progression is just like a whole nother thing, right? Because I think a lot of people talk about progressing in terms of their life, right? Like, I need to progress, or like, you need to hurry up and get on with your life. You know what I mean? Progress. And I definitely love to talk about that and love to think about progression. But I think progression also should happen generationally, right?
Yeah. Can you talk about how, your what your parent, because parents always say, oh, I'm trying to do the best for my family.
Sure.
And you had mentioned it earlier too, or not earlier, but before when we went to lunch, but you had talked about, you had talked about what was best for your grandparents, what was best for your parents. And then now, just moving it forward generationally, like you were talking about.
Yeah, man. Well, it's like, right, because your decisions, at the end of the day, your decisions are your decisions, and everyone has to respect that. And that's both the beautiful part of life and sometimes the ugly part of life, right? But again, if you look at progression like a generational sequence, right, everyone should be a little bit further than the next generation, right? And I think it's important when they say, hey, remember those who came before you. I think that's the reason why, right? I grew up here. I was born here. I might look hecka Tongan, right? Like, but someone in Tongan would be like, dude, that is the most Palangi Tongan dude I've ever seen, right? But I was here, and that's by no mistake. You know what I mean? My great grandpa joined the church. My grandpa decided to migrate here, bring his family here. My dad, built a company with his brothers, and now I'm here in a situation where, I've watched my dad and his brothers build a company in the land of the home of the free and the brave, or whatever. Like, and I'm here. I was just born here. I had nothing to do with it. I just opened my eyes, and one day I'm here in the United States of freaking America, man. And that's so cool. But I had nothing to do with it. So it's important that I remember everyone that came here. My dad and his brothers started a construction company when I was 12 years old, back in 2002. The company has grown year over year, and I've thought a lot about that. And I have nothing to do with it. My dad and his brothers, they just decided to do that. I was just born again. Like, again, I owe it to them to at least consider it, right? Or to at least attempt to show some gratitude, because I had nothing to do with that. My dad and his brothers just did that. And the company has grown, and maybe about 8 years ago, me and my little brother started running the company. But what does that have to do with me? That has little to do with me, and maybe more to do about everyone who came before, starting with my dad and his brothers, then to my grandparents, and then to their generationally, there has been some progress. And when I think about it like that, then it becomes my responsibility to move forward. Yeah. Right? It's more of an obligation. I can't just waste, like, there's times where I'd like to sit around and hang out and waste time and do things that, like, that are fun. But when I have that in perspective of, dude, I was just here. You could probably go down to anywhere here. You could go down to Provo or UVU or any of the LDSBC even, and pick out a kid who would love to be in the opera. Like my wife, when she was in school in Salt Lake a couple of years ago, there was a lot of kids from Brazil, right? And they're just happy to even go to school in Brazil, let alone have an opportunity to try to run a company in America, right? Right. Dude, there's probably 100 of those kids that would just do a way better job than I'm doing today, right? But the opportunity, for whatever reason, I was born here, not them. And even out of respect to them, who would have done a killer job, I need to try. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so culture and family and support, all of that plays into the decisions that I make today, because it's not just going to affect me. It affects everyone after me, right? I would like to build something that would benefit anyone that comes after me, but also pays respect and gratitude to everybody that came before, because all I did was open my eyes. I was just born here. Like, I don't, I mispronounce all the Tongan alphabet or Samoan. I don't speak the language, and I can't pass that on. So if there's anything that I can pass on from those who came before me, while my knowledge is very limited in terms of cultural practices, there's a principle that I could give back, and that's gratitude, right? And that, I think, speaks louder and more effectively than the language itself.
And for me, that's a reason why I always ask that question, would your grandparents or whoever it was that migrated, would they be proud of their sacrifice? Because if we continue, like you said, if we're grateful and in showing gratitude for the sacrifices that they made, that, puts it into perspective, that maybe we need to work harder, or maybe we need to do better, but at the end of the day, if we recognize their sacrifices and, just, like in your situation, your dad has something to pass on to you as kids, right? And that's something that, like you said, you just handed to you, or not, but it's because you were born here.
Right.
And for me, I just think about my cousins, same age as me, born in Tonga, whereas for me, I was born here in the States, and how much different our lives are.
Yeah.
Just because we're born in two separate places.
Yeah.
But we're the same people, same family, but because of the opportunities afforded us here, and living and working towards the American dream.
100%, man.
I think that's just the difference, and
Dude,
the gratitude.
100%. Look, I just opened my eyes. I didn't do anything. And I just have all this cool stuff in front of me. And if I'm not careful, I start to get blind to that, right? I kind of start to forget or feel entitled to whatever, right? But what am I entitled to? You know what I mean? It's no mistake that you and I opened our eyes and we happen to be in America.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? There's that was a calculated decision that took years and decades before we even came about. And there should be gratitude and respect paid to those who did that, whether they're here or not.
Yeah.
So.
And man, for me, that was just a beautiful segment that we talked about with the culture, in respects to culture and just the lives that we're living. But now we'll just move on, to the second part, which is talking about who you are today, what we're doing. And you kind of already mentioned it with your dad, like you taking over your dad's company.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about, talking about the company that your dad made, and then that you guys have taken over, you and your brother, and then we'll get into your media part after.
Yeah, man. Well, like, it's interesting. I love that you when you asked your first question, right? Like, you talk about your name, and even though like I mispronounce things, and like I'm probably getting in trouble for not maybe I mentioned my grandpa's village wrong or something. I don't know,
right?
But like but when. Like it's hard to just talk about one person, right? Because nobody, like on the podcast that like I just released this last week, we had Jeremy Nevis come on, who's like a local entrepreneur, and he talks about how no one is self-made, right? Like there's it
takes a village, right?
Yeah,
village made.
Exactly, and so it's not by yourself. So in terms of talking about like where I'm at today professionally, like. I can't, you know what I mean? Like, and even mentioning, this company that my dad started, I feel like that's not even fair to say that. My dad started the company with his brothers. And that's super important. I have to understand that it had, there not been family members that took the sacrifice to start this thing, right? That became a business. That I was only 12 years old, dude. I didn't know what was going on. I was probably worried about like girls calling my house and like hanging up because my mom answers the phone.
Right.
But you know what I mean? You're right. It takes a village, to raise a child or even a business and a company. And so I can't say that, my dad started this company without mentioning that, man, he started with his brothers, and they all sacrificed a lot. They all sacrificed a ton. And the benefits that I receive today have a lot to do with that. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of other factors in that too, but I think it's just super important. And when we talk about, maybe my definition of what my last name meant to me, support, right? And those are just a bunch of brothers supporting, this idea to start a construction company. And then I came about like some snot-nosed kid, like, hey, that's my dad, you know what I mean? And for whatever reason, it falls into my lap, you know what I mean? And I can't take any credit for anything really professionally yet, you know what I mean? Because, or maybe even ever, right? Because it's always everyone else involved. And so they started that back in 2002, and it was the type of construction that we do is utility construction. And so pretty much what that means is we bury a lot of like fiber and cable lines for companies like Comcast or Utopia, Google Fiber. Anytime that those lines kind of come through your yard, there's a construction company that has to come through and bury those. That's what we do. Sometimes we go under roads. And so it's kind of a maybe a little bit of an obscure, like or not usual profession, right? Because it's not like I don't work at like Apple and I can't hook you up with like the newest Nikes, right? But like if you need a trench dug, I can bury your power line for you. You know what I mean? So,
or even just with the name Yate, you think of like rock walls, or you think of like making, cement, pouring concrete. But this kind of Yate is a different kind of Yate.
Yep, it's a very different kind. So like, a lot of like stuff that's maybe less trendy than like a software company, right? But I'm grateful that they started that, because I think I learned. Dude, the hustle is the hustle, man. And you know what? Like, while that might not be as trendy or as flashy as starting a software company and selling to Facebook, man, I lived a pretty comfortable life, and it all had nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? It had everything to do with, my dad and his brother starting this. And then there's a bunch of Miko guys that work with us too. And it has more to do with them. Yeah. And it's just, I think, always so important to remember that. But so they started that, and it grew. Eventually, pretty much all the brothers started their own companies after a while. So it's kind of cool to kind of see it kind of come full circle, and everyone kind of building up, branching out, and doing their own, moving on their own entrepreneurial endeavors. But that's how it started. And then when I got back from my mission, a few years later, my brother and I decided to take on the family company, and so that's what it is. And we've been lucky enough since we joined like 8 years ago. I think we've grown year over year ever since then. And I'm pretty sure we did then before that too. But I just didn't keep care before. But we've grown year over year since then, and this year I think we're gonna also grow too. It'll be kind of similar to last year, but we're projected to even surpass last year. So
despite COVID, right?
Oh, dude, we're lucky, man. I don't know how the heck we're so lucky, but America's cool, man. I love America because for whatever reason, we're still working with everyone. Honestly, what it is everyone's going home. They can't work from home, and so like they need their internet lines, and so now there's more pressure to have good internet, and so we need to go out there, yeah. And fix some of those lines. So we're lucky, but again, not because of me.
Yeah. Can you mention maybe some of the lessons that you've learned that your dad has passed on to you, or maybe even learn running the company, that you and your brother are running?
Yeah, dude, I can. I don't know where to start. I think one of the lessons that you have to learn, and this is a lesson that maybe I haven't even learned yet, right? It's maybe one of those things that kind of keeps reoccurring. But like working with family is interesting, right? Like there's a word for it, right? Nepotism. Yeah. When you're working with family, and that's a tough thing to do. I work with my brother every day, and sometimes, I look at him like my brother, and he's my little brother. I want to slap him, but I should look at, and maybe this isn't even a lesson that was passed down. It just kind of just happens. Once you decide you're going to work with family, just be prepared. And there's a lot of people in business who will already tell you that. I don't have to be the first one to tell you that. So anytime that you're going to work with family, you just have to understand that it's going to be tough. And the reason why is because you don't go home. Work comes with you wherever you go. If you're going to a family camp or if you're going to Deer Creek for a ward activity or something, like work is always going to be with you. And I get in trouble a lot of times because maybe a family barbecue that's meant to be, a family focused activity.
Work
my
comes
brother,
up.
we'll start like, hey, did that crew get this? Let's make sure that we, move this equipment over. Their truck broke down. Okay, let's go. Where's it at? And we end up having like a full-on work meeting at a family thing. And then, all the wives, bless their hearts, are kind of rolling their eyes. It's like, dude, these guys. And so maybe that's one of the more important lessons is that when you're home, be home. And I think especially if you're starting a business, I have a bunch of friends who are starting a business, who has started businesses, and it's so easy it's really easy to let that consume you in your life. But when you're home, be home. You can pick whatever practice you want, right? If it's leave your phone at in your car or whatever, or don't check emails past a certain time. You can pick whatever practice, but the principle is be home, be present. There was and I'm not bringing this up to be churchy, but the Russell M. Nelson was a doctor before his religious duties.
Yep.
And I read an article saying that when he was doing his residency or whatever, they're doing these rotations, and because he was like a trauma heart surgeon or whatever, he had to be on call. So there was times where he was at home for just a limited amount of time, sometimes just a few hours. And the article had talked to whoever wrote the article, had talked to his wife, and his wife had said, and that's where I get that saying from, that whenever he was home, he was home. You know what I mean? And so and a doctor does way more important stuff than I do. So if he can do it, we all can do it.
Man, I guess just the principle behind that is just being present, right? Always being present in the moment. And then just talking about, being an entrepreneur, your family, branching out, your dad's siblings at least. Yeah. Now that you can talk about yourself being an entrepreneur or trying to get into this media company that you're talking about. Can you share a little bit about what that is, the name of it, and just I guess the goal and the vision behind that? Yeah, man. So the project that we're working on, it's called Vail Media. Not Vale, but whatever. I think that's cool. Whoever reads it, Vale is Vale, yeah. Because it means dumb in Tongan.
and that's cool. I know that there's been some people who reached out, but I knew that. I kind of knew that there was maybe a double entendre in terms of Vale also meaning dumb or stupid, but no. So Vail comes from, if you Google Vail, just VALE, it's the definition will come up in poetry. It's a shortened version of Valley. And I thought it was appropriate given that our media company wants to push out content that's top to bottom Utah, right? We'll wear Utah all day long. And forever long, right? Because, and so I thought Valley, considering from Cache Valley to Utah Valley to Salt Lake Valley to West Valley. I thought it was just kind of fitting in terms of maybe a local feel, right? So Vail Media is the project that we're pushing right now, and it's kind of a little difficult to describe because it's a brand that we're definitely trying to establish. Underneath the brand will be a bunch of different media projects. So we just launched a podcast this week. I mentioned Jeremy Nevis, the guy with the Lamborghini who drove the 5-year-old kid in Ogden who tried to steal his mom's car. He gave him a ride. So check it out. He tells the whole story on there. Or you can look it up on KSL or whatever. They did a new story on it too. So the podcast, which is called Now You Know, which is separate. Now the podcast is just meant to highlight local influencers, neighbors. We're gonna have you on the show, some of our local athletes, and just kind of tell their story. But the whole goal is just to inspire and move our community forward.
Yep.
And so that's the podcast. It's coming soon, we're working on some video content and even some written articles that you can share. If Facebook is your thing and you just like to share videos and articles, we'll have that. If you're on Instagram, which is kind of our primary focus for phase one, as we're technically kind of like in the seed stage, growing out of it. But so that's kind of what the brand is about. So the brand will push out all types of content, any kind of content, audio, visual, or written content. We'll push all of that out eventually. Right now we're focusing on a podcast, and then within the next month or so, you'll see some other things that'll come out in terms of which mediums we'll be using to push and promote the brand, including partnering with you guys on a service project, hopefully September time-ish. So that's what the brand is, and maybe the why behind it is like, and I mentioned this, and I'm not like the selfie guy, like, hey, let me tell my story or whatever, right? But like, I mentioned it on a story, which was my first story, which was really uncomfortable for me. And if you know me, you were probably cringing as much as I was. But the why is, dude, there was in 2017. Now I'm a big Jazz fan because I'm Johnny Utah, like I mentioned. And in 2017, the NBA playoffs, there's some players that said, dude, we don't want to play in Utah. We hope we don't have to play there because Utah has no nightlife. And I was like, and me, along with a lot of other Utah grateful fans, right, and also Utah Jazz fans, responded in a really cool way, right? Like, and there was a hashtag Utah Nightlife or Salt Lake Nightlife, I can't remember what it was, and it was just showing the different things that you could do in Utah, and I love that, man, because I feel like Utah gets a hard time, right, from people who aren't familiar with Utah, right? Like in the poly community, there's polys from California that love to call Utah Bootah, like, cause like boo, Utah is the worst or whatever, and I heard that growing up, like. And not until like maybe the 2000s, Utah athletes weren't getting a lot of shine, right? Like now, luckily, our athletes in terms of football are getting kind of maybe credit that they deserve, but that's kind of maybe a more recent thing. And then there's just so much to be proud of, like, and I don't want to apologize for anything that we are, right? Like there's a lot of like, and I mentioned to you guys, like when I used to live in Portland, and I had a friend who was like, man, but Utah has like a lot of white people, like trying to get me to talk negative. And I was like, dude, I can show you some of the cool, show me 5 of your best friends. I'll show you people, five of my white friends that are just as cool. Because like, dude, it's all good, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and whatever, dude, whatever Utah, if it's quirky, I'm down for it, and I'll admit that it's quirky. I'm not going to apologize for it because I'm just happy about it. Have you seen how clean Salt Lake City is compared to other big cities like LA or New York, right? Like our city is spotless when you compare the two, and I'm grateful for that. I'll take that. You know what I mean? And so I think there are a lot of people who like Utah as much as I like Utah. And so from top to bottom, our brand wants to wear Utah. So on our video content, some of the stuff that we're working on right now, the background music will even be by Utah producers. Nice. Hopefully we can collaborate with, right now we're working on a project where hopefully we can collaborate with different Utah artists and a Utah school. With a different Utah media company that could perhaps film it. And I just kind of want to be this place where everyone can kind of collaborate together and push out content. But from top to bottom, whatever you're thinking about, like, was that you? Like, yeah. Utah, dude. And you don't have to be here. You don't have to live here. If you just like Utah, if you think the name of Utah phonetically, if that sounds cool, dude, you're a part of it, man. Like, Cause yeah, man, I'm just about it. So that experience with the Utah Jazz, that was maybe the genesis of the idea, and then it's just kind of been marinating right in my mind for the past few years, and recently we've been able to put together some content in terms of a podcast, and then we'll branch out hopefully here shortly. So that's kind of a long explanation, which I'm kind of glad. Which is good, yeah. Because like normally when people ask, they're not asking for that. They just kind of want like a 2-second version. Yeah. But now they have no choice because they're listening to this episode right now, so I can kind of go into detail. But yeah, that's kind of what Vail's about. So I have a meager following right now, but check it out, Vail Media. Right now we're on. Check it, yeah. We'll actually, go ahead and right before I came here, we're working on putting our pages on all the other social media platforms. So hopefully by the time this comes out, you can find us on all major social media platforms. And hopefully like our page looks like more full. Right now I only have like three things on there, but like, but I appreciate also the opportunity to grow. That's such a cool thing about social media, even with you, and I think you could attest to that too. Like growing with everybody is such a. It's really cool and interesting, but it's like really organic too, right? Like to be able to grow with someone and see them develop. And so I'm hoping that maybe we could mimic some of the footsteps that you left behind for us, so that we can, grow with whoever's willing to follow our journey.
Yeah, man. Just speaking on growth, for me, it just kind of grew, just like you said, organically because of the village, the village that helped raise me, and that, they're like, oh, this guy is trying to do something, or, and so in seeing someone trying to step out and create something or do something new, everybody's like, oh, let's follow, and so I just kind of appreciate, the growth in that way. Mm-hmm. But hey, we... Tua Kealoha, when he was here, his favorite quote, or one of his sayings is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah,
we go together. That. So, hey, we in this together, And so, I just appreciate you, accepting and wanting to come and talk story and just share your story. And I'm sure in sharing your story, it'll inspire someone else, just as it has inspired me.
Yeah.
And so, just another question for your Vail Media: is it at the top of it, is it just you, or do you have other people creating with you that are creators with you, or is there other people working on the project with you?
Yeah. So you mean, and that's maybe a common theme through our conversation, right? Nothing's done alone.
Yeah.
So I do have a small team working with me. So yeah, I do have a small team working with me. Family members even working with me to kind of push us out right now, and yeah, that's and hopefully we'll grow. But but going back to kind of the idea, right? It's like hopefully we're able to if there's maybe an artist, whether you're a music artist or a painter or whatever, and you have an idea to hey, I want to do this or whatever, and you kind of, I'm hoping that I could be that the brand could be a place where everyone can kind of connect, and that you could, if you wanted to watch a YouTube video or you would know that all the content that we're pushing out is Utah based, and we'll have I'm hoping that in the future we could have if you wanted to watch a funny series, right? Hopefully there's a Utah creator that maybe we could push their content out, or maybe partner with them on something where we're okay, well, I don't know, maybe we'll do the first 6 episodes or something, and if it works out, then we can work it out at that point. Yeah. I don't know. That's the dreamer part of me. I don't want to tap into that, because then the podcast is going to go for 24 hours, because I'm a dreamer for sure. So I think all the time and live in La La Land, and most of my life is trying to make La La Land reality. But
nice. Well, for those who are trying to get a hold of you on social medias, on your social media platform, can you go ahead and tell them where they can reach you at?
Yeah, so
just so we can give a plug. So shout out to Vail Media.
Our handle Vail Media is vailmedia.ut for Utah.
Okay.
And it should be the same by the time this comes out. Hopefully, Twitter and Snapchat and everything will be up to date too. And then on Facebook, it should just be Vail Media. And so.
All right, man. Well, at this time, we'll just get into some rapid fire questions. So as soon as they pop in your mind, go ahead and let us know.
My mind, right?
So what takes up too much of your time?
My phone.
What do you wish you knew more about?
Sorry.
No worries.
Is nothing. So let me do something. Say the question one more time.
What do you wish you knew more about?
Effective parenting. Yeah, I have 3 little girls.
Ooh, that's crazy.
Yeah, there are 3 kids in 3 years, and I just wish I knew how to be an effective parent. Actually, I think I know. I just don't do it.
Yeah. What or who inspires you?
What or who inspires me? Man, I think I'm really big into business. So a lot of business leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs, you name it, and especially our Utah entrepreneurs, I I kind of fangirl over all the Utah entrepreneurs because like I'm like big and small startup, or if a company was handed
Mm.
down, you mean from a generational standpoint, like, or like I love, or if you started a small company and then sold for billions of dollars, i.e. a few of these guys over here in Utah.
I know. I want to say
Qualtrics
Qualtrics. Yeah.
and Qualtrics and Domo,
Yeah.
or it was Omniture actually, but yeah.
What are some things you had to unlearn?
Dude, I don't know if I like the term unlearn. I think I just like the term learning more, right? So it's like maybe there's some stuff that I knew or practiced in the past because you mean that was just what happened, and you mean like maybe I joked around too much, but then I just learned more about other people and their feelings or whatever. You mean then I learned okay, there's a time. So um, something that I had to maybe I would phrase it like just learn more about is communication.
What's your favorite book?
Dude, so I'm like a classic guy on this. So like this is kind of like the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is like your kind of if you're taking a business class in your undergrad class like at any university, you'll probably have to read that or you're smart if you do. And it kind of goes over like a lot of fundamental things. But like, I read a lot. Like I love reading, especially those types of books. But like, I always come back to them because I feel like in terms of principles and fundamentals, and you mean kind of truths that don't change. Uh, that's it for me, and I recommend it for everybody.
If you could spend the day with someone dead or alive to pick their brain, who would it be?
Okay, so I can't. I'm gonna not count family because I would always choose someone from my family.
Right.
Like, if it was someone dead or alive, dude, honestly, all the cool people that you can think of that are dead, you put their names into a hat, and I'd be down. If it was MLK, like Martin Luther King Jr. or Einstein or Gandhi or Steve Jobs,
Yeah.
like all of that. Steve Jobs would be cool, but like, and if you put their name into a hat, kind of all the notable ones,
Any of
Nelson
them.
Mandela, and you pull their name out, I'd be down for any of those hats.
What's special about the place you grew up?
And I think it just has to be, it has to be family. I'm a big believer in, um, like it's not where you are, you where you're at. It's more who you're with. Like, and this is kind of my vacation philosophy. Like, I don't care if I'm like in like the most expensive part of whatever expensive place, or if I'm just like at a hotel down the street, staycation. If I'm with like the right group of people, that's
It
more
doesn't
important.
matter. I like that. What have you only recently formed an opinion about?
Um, I think I've reformed my opinion on parenting,
Okay.
right? Like, because there's a lot of things that like I thought like, man, if my kid ever acts like that, like I'm gonna like you know what I mean, and like, I don't, like, and then you have kids, and like, oh,
No.
I get it now.
Yeah. So, what song will guarantee to make you dance?
Dude, anything by Casey and the Sunshine Band, right? That's like any dude. I like all the songs that they play at like the fall board dances.
Yep, exactly.
All of that, dude. Like it's funny because when you're little, you're like, dang, like I want
Right.
this song, whatever's new. But like now, like that's what I like to listen
No.
to. The one time a year I work out.
So, what's the luckiest thing that's happened to you?
Um, maybe just to kind of tie in this whole thing, opening my eyes and just being where I'm at, like just being born where I'm at and meeting and being around the people. I mean, my wife. I was lucky to get my wife. I was lucky to be in the family that I'm in. So, all that. Generic, I know.
Shout out to the wifey. That's always a good answer, though. That's the best answer, you know?
Well, we'll see if she even gets this far.
Right? She heard the first part of the answer, like, no.
She never brings this up when we talk to her, then I know she's going to watch it.
What could you give a 40-minute presentation on with no preparation?
Dude, I like that question. I don't know the answer to it, but I think I just talk a lot, so I'd figure something out. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Figure it out as we go, right?
you know what I mean?
What are you most looking forward to in the next 10 years?
hopefully seeing a company grow, right? Like this brand that we're building, I think, hopefully it grows, right? The odds are against me. Most startups don't work out, and I'm okay with that. If you mean, but I'm willing to try my hand at it, and hopefully, well, I'll see you at the end of a decade, and we can circle back to
Right.
this.
What hobby would you get into if time and money weren't an issue?
Dude, fishing.
Ooh, I
I
like
want to get
that.
into fishing, man. Like it just like I'm pretty mellow. Like, and I know a lot of people
Just a
don't like
relaxed
fishing
time,
for that
yeah.
reason. It's like too mellow. But yeah, I think I get into fishing.
Um, what is something? Oh, when people come to you for help, what do they usually need help with?
Dude, I think there's not like a common denominator when people right like try to reach out to me. I think I just have like too many opinions and like a lot to talk about. And so like whatever opinion I have regarding whatever situation, I'm always happy to share. I'm probably wrong 9 times out of 10, so I'm just hoping that they catch me on that one time
The
out of
one.
10 that I'm wrong.
What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their life?
Dude, I think everybody should. Dude, I heard this, and I feel like a lot of industries say this, like with their jobs, like everyone should be this. I mean, at least once in their life. But one thing, so like, I don't know if that's true for all industries, but I think everyone should try serving tables like at a restaurant.
Okay.
Um, I know that's kind of off the wall and super random, but I think you just learn how to treat people better and learn again maybe a deeper level of communicating.
And
I didn't serve. I served tables like for like 2 months. I mean, it was just a thing. But I think the way ever since it's weird because a small 2 month stint of serving tables, I mean, years ago was
change your life, or like
every time I talk to a waiter, even if my service is bad, I feel like I'm always coming from a place of empathy or compassion to like, to, I understand. Like,
And maybe another thing for Polynesians is learning how to tip, yeah.
dude,
If you know how to, if you
let's make a plug right here, dude.
because Polys don't really tip, right?
Well, dude, and part of that is like maybe like we're just, dude. I grew up and I just thought that $2 was a standard tip. Like I just thought like $2.
Everything $2.
Like whatever, and I didn't know about the 15 or 20% rule, right? Of like, and if there's good service, bad service, you know what I mean? And the whole drink thing. Like some people get mad if they drink if their drink is done.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, relax, man. Like, again, going back to the thing, you just opened your eyes and you were here. Like, just be happy that you let someone pour you a drink. Like, and so, yeah, I want to make a plug and hopefully encourage all those listening that, I mean, be generous. We're known to be like a generous people, and I think that should also bleed through to our tipping.
And which of your scars has the best story behind it?
Like physical scars.
Yeah. Oh, we don't want to get into the other ones too deep, yeah. The emotional scars.
Again, another 24 hours. No, I don't have too many scars. So like when I squint my eyes, I get this kind of little bump underneath my eye. When I was little, just playing, with cousins, doing what cousins do. My cousin, somehow my face ended up at the corner of a chair, and I had to get stitches there. So it's been there ever since.
What helps you live in the moment?
My kids.
I like
sometimes
that, yeah.
you get so stressed out, or caught up with work or whatever projects, or you're angry at your brother or something, and then your kid like does something really innocent and cute, and you're just like, man, that's what it's about. Like, why am I worried about all this other stuff?
Yeah. And finally, if you could give back to your village, how or what would you do?
So the first thing is always gratitude, right? Because that's the only thing you can give to those who are not here, right? So there's people who are part of my village that are not here
Passed
anymore.
on, yeah.
So that has to be the first thing, and then the second thing for those who are here and maybe who will be after, I think is to teach. They need to teach, you know what I mean, and teach and lift. You know what I mean? So wherever you're at, if you're on higher ground, try to lift those around you, and if you see more, try to lift them up so that they can see just as much or even more than that.
Amen. Well, brother, you made it through the gauntlet today, and appreciate the time, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, shoot. Again, go check out vailmedia.utah on all their platforms.
Yep.
Go ahead and plug that in, man. It's a new and up and coming media platform, and it's all about Utah. It's for Utahns by Utahns, so
Yep.
we in there,
We're gonna steal that from Fubu. That's gonna be
exactly, for us by us, right? But man, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Village Made podcast. Again, my name is Vail Media, and we'll check you out later.